Hey everyone, this is Ben with BathroomBrewsMTG. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at some of the top uncommons and commons from Phyrexia All Be One. But first, let's take a quick look at the set's mechanics. One of the most exciting things about this set is its emphasis on poison counters, a returning mechanic, and the new oil counters in combination with proliferation. But enough about the set as a whole, let's get into the top 10. At number 10, we have Minor Misstep. It's a 1 mana blue instant that says, counter target spell with mana value 1 or less. I don't know about you, but my dream is to counter someone's turn 1 Soul Ring with this bad boy. I think it'll be a very meta-dependent card. If your group meta has a lot of mana dorks and fast mana, you might want this. If it's a more casual pod, I'd probably avoid this. The card everyone is going to compare this to is Mental Misstep. It's a blue instant that costs 1 Phyrexian blue, so that's 1 blue mana or 2 life, that says counter target spell with converted mana cost of 1. Free spells in Magic are almost always good, and Mental Misstep is no different. Which is why I think it is the better card, but coming in at nearly $5 at the time of recording, I think Minor Misstep will make a fine budget option. Also, there aren't a lot of zero-cost spells in EDH, well, casual EDH I should say, and cards like Living End or Crashing Footfalls aren't that common in Commander, so I don't know if that zero cost will really make that big of a difference in most pods. Coming in at number 9, we have Scheming Aspirant. This 2 mana black, 1/3 Phyrexian Advisor says, whenever you proliferate, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. While its ability is super niche, I think proliferation decks, or just decks with a lot of proliferation in general, this will be one of the best ways to close out games. Look at cards like Contagion Engine, which for 4 mana will let you proliferate twice, which comes out to 12 damage for 4 mana. Or Inexorable Tide, letting you proliferate whenever you cast a spell. Heck, even with Evolution Sage out, all of your lands essentially drain the table out. I expect to see a lot of this in Super Friend decks, and I will be adding one to the Karth the Lion deck I'm currently working on. Do not sleep on this card, I'm sure there'll be plenty of games to end because of it. At number 8, we have Vat of Rebirth. It's a 1 black mana artifact that says, whenever another artifact or creature you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put an oil counter on Vat of Rebirth, and you can pay 2 and a black to tap it, and remove 4 oil counters from it, to return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield, activate only as a sorcery. The first thing I noticed is it doesn't say non-token. So if you're playing any deck with a lot of treasures or a lot of token fodder, getting the 4 counters on this really shouldn't be an issue. I think this card has the potential to be an Aristocrats or an Artifact deck staple. We already play cards like Reassembling Skeleton, which we need to pay 2 to return to the battlefield tapped, and this is 1 more mana to return any target creature. But graveyard-based artifact decks is where this thing's going to shine the brightest. We can use cards like Clock of Omen to untap Vat to get multiple uses, and sack outlets such as KCI or Ashnod's Altar for mana. I'm sure there are more ways to abuse this, but those are the first 2 that come to mind. Speaking of oil counters, at number 7 we have Exuberant Fuseling. This 1 mana 0/1 red Phyrexian Goblin Warrior has Trample, and it gets +1/+0 for each oil counter on it. And whenever it enters the battlefield, and whenever another creature or artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put an oil counter on it. I think we're going to see this card a lot in Goblin Tribal decks and Aristocrat decks, since people tend to sacrifice a lot in both archetypes. Also, it doesn't say non-token. Despite its low toughness, you can grow this thing pretty dang fast and swing in with a big trampler. What I want to do is I want to use Chandra's Ignition to burn the table out with it. The only reason I wouldn't put this in an artifact deck is because it isn't an artifact itself, but with the amount of treasure people can generate in this format, I'd be on the lookout for this little goblin. It will definitely steal games from time to time. At number 6, we have Necrogen Communion, a 2 mana black enchantment aura that says, enchant creature you control. Enchanted creature has Toxic 2, and when enchanted creature dies, return that card to the battlefield under your control. The first card that comes to mind when I look at this is Kaya's Ghost Form, a 1 mana black enchantment that when you enchant the target creature, if it gets exiled or leaves the battlefield, return it to the battlefield under your control. While this aura won't return it from exile, putting this on your commander as a way to protect it seems way too good to pass up. This is especially true if your commander is key to your deck, such as Crick, Son of Yawgmoth. Quick rules note, since it says enchant creature you control, if you lose control of that creature for any reason while it's enchanted, the aura will fall right off due to state-based actions. Speaking of state-based actions, it would be a based action if you gave this video a like and subscribed. It really helps out the channel. At number 5, we have Vanish into Eternity, a 3 mana white instant that exiles target non-land permanent. The spell costs 3 more to cast if it targets a creature. While we don't want to pay 6 mana to exile a creature, being able to exile any other problematic non-land permanent for just 3 mana is way too good to pass up. This feels somewhere in between Generous Gift and Anguish Unmaking, both of which are definitely a lot better, but this should be much cheaper given it's a common in a standard printed set. White already has Swords to Plowshare and Path to Exile to deal with indestructible creatures, but not a ton of ways to exile other card types for super cheap. I'm going to be testing this in my mono white, Azorius, and probably Orzhov decks, since blue and black tend to struggle with enchantments. Number 4 on the list is Gleeful Demolition. It's a 1-mana red sorcery that says, destroy target artifact. If you control that artifact, create 3 1/1 red Phyrexian goblin creature tokens. This card is a strictly better Kuldotha Rebirth. Like a lot of cards in this set, it gives you options, which I think is great. You can either destroy someone's Soul Ring, Artifact Land, or Portal to Phyrexia for 1 red, or you can destroy a treasure you control to create 3 goblins. While the 1/1s in most decks won't come up all that often, Goblin Tribal decks can take advantage of this card and should definitely add it in. If I had a Naya token deck, I would slot this in for sure. I think the flexibility is a key part of what makes this card so high on the list for me. Most of the time, it's a 1-mana removal spell, but when you need the bodies, you have them. Number 3 is even more removal with Kangerbloom, a 2-mana 3/2 green Phyrexian fungus creature that says, you may pay 1 and sacrifice it. Choose 1. Destroy target artifact, destroy target enchantment, or proliferate. I will definitely be running this over a card like Outland Liberator because I don't want to track day and night in a game of Commander. And any creature deck with green can include this as another piece of removal. But then it also proliferates when you need it to. I expect to see this in budget Marin decks quite a bit. I think you can sacrifice it and then choose Proliferate, but when it dies, it'll trigger Marin's ability, giving you an experience counter. And then you can proliferate that experience counter, then at the end of the turn, return this to the battlefield with Marin's ability, then sacrifice it again, get another experience counter, and proliferate once more. So you can get 4 experience counters with this thing. Let me know in the comments section below if that rules interaction is correct, but I'm pretty sure it is. Now these last 2 are very close for me, but after a lot of thinking, my number 2 choice is Unnatural Restoration. It's a 2-mana green sorcery that returns target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand, and then you proliferate. This reminds me most of the card Regrowth, but only for permanents, which in green decks is most of your card types anyway. And since a lot of green decks happen to have counters in them, the proliferation should almost always be useful. I don't have much else to say about this card. It's a good value piece. Pick a couple copies up, try it out, and let me know what you think. And number 1 on my list is Armored Scrapgorger. This 2-mana 0/3 Phyrexian beast says, it gets +3/+0 as long as you have 3 or more oil counters on it, tap it to add a mana of any color, and when it becomes tapped, exile target card from a graveyard and put an oil counter on it. This card does 2 things and it does them really well. It ramps you, and it's graveyard hate. There's a quick rules note I want to go over. That exile trigger isn't a May trigger, so if you're the only one with a card in your graveyard, you will have to exile it. But I think that small downside is worth the massive upside of this thing. It's color fixing for all green X decks, and for 2 mana add uncommon, and has 3 toughness. Oh, and since it's a beast, you can add it to Tawnos the Toymaker to get an additional copy of it. Even late game when you don't need the mana, you can tap this to remove a key card from someone's graveyard. Again, there isn't much to say about this card other than it's powerful. Grab a few for your decks, you will not be disappointed. Speaking of disappointment, if I disappointed you with this list, let me know what you changed in the comment section below. Special shout out to all my patrons who are on screen here. If you'd like to join them in supporting the channel, my Patreon is linked in the video description below. You get a ton of fun perks, so definitely check it out. Even $2 a month goes a long way. Thank you to my friend Garrick Morgan for creating my intro music. You can find all of his socials in the video description as well. Make sure to check out my Brothers War top 10 commons and uncommons shown on the left here, and my $100 budget Rebel deck on the right. And as always, this has been Ben with BathroomBrewsMTG, and remember, always wash your hands.